Christine is the Senior Manager, Water Protection and Restoration for the Credit Valley Conservation Authority. With a team of 21 staff, Christine is responsible for watershed and sub-watershed studies, developing guidance documents and providing assistance to stakeholders, implementing LID practices, in-stream real-time water quality monitoring, and monitoring of stormwater technologies. Prior to starting at the CVC, Christine got her master's degree in water resources engineering from the University of Guelph and worked for a leading UV manufacturer. Welcome, Christine. Thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you. What a great day so far. I've learned a lot, and I wish I had have been able to hear some of the presentations ahead of time when I was creating my presentation, because I think I might have made some slight adjustments, but hopefully we can pick up on some of the things that I touch on today in the panel discussion. So my topic is on risk and reducing risk and building resilience in the Credit River. And for those of you who are out of the province, may not know what conservation authorities do, we work on a watershed basis, primarily looking at floodplain management, and water resources is my role, but we also look at natural heritage stewardship activities. Often, what I've found when I talk to people about changing stormwater approaches, I get, no, change is risky. And so I thought I'd put these up because to me, and I'm going to share with you some of our stories that we've learned in the watershed, to me, continuing to go along the path and do the same thing that we've been doing is more risky. Because as I will share with you some of the stories, we know those risks. And personally, I don't want to keep exacerbating that because that's just the definition of insanity. So again, a lot of you have touched on this extreme events. In Mississauga, there's been two storm events, over 200-year storm events in the last 4 years. Residents have been saying, you said that these were extreme events that didn't happen one in 100 years, and we had it 4 years ago. So, again, we've talked about educating residents, but I think we also have to look at sort of our standards and where we're going moving forward with our level of service. What I wanted to touch on, though, is it's not just extreme events that cause damage. It is also smaller events, and I think I've talked to Hamilton, and they were saying even 6-month storm events can cause some damage. And so again, it's not just large extreme events, it's also more frequent events that can cause damage, and if they're happening more frequently, then there's more damage. Again, a lot of times people think of flooding when they talk about stormwater. A lot of people consider that like the heart attack. But also as part of stormwater management, we look at spills response and water quality and pollution. A lot of people associate that with sort of the cancer, right? The things people don't necessarily see immediately with respect to stormwater management problems. But what we found is that, water quality and spills do cost. So one of the things that I think people forget when we talk about the environment, I hear, oh, that's at a cost. You're making me spend money to protect the environment. But I say, here's what's at stake if we don't. 40% of Canada's economic activity is based on the Great Lakes. 2 years ago, we had Mayor Richard Daley, the former mayor of Chicago, come. And he said it astounds him that our government does not realize that we have a resource between the two of us that no other countries have. Can't be outsourced. India and China don't have this. And it's 40% of our economic activity. Provides drinking water to 8.5 million. And, those beach closures cost money too. So it's not just extreme events. And so that's one of the things I want to touch on in some of the stories in our watershed. One of the things you talked about in a lot of these presentations is Canadians' attitudes towards water. And so I've highlighted in the 2013 RBC Water Attitude Study 2 points. And if you have a chance, go on there, because again, this is another thing about public outreach that it gets me. Murray Pound said, you know, developers spend up to 8% of their home price on marketing, and yet municipalities and CAs spend less than 1%, and we wonder why we don't get change. So, I mean, if we look at these attitudes, candidates do not see the immediate need for investment in stormwater management. So how are you going to get your taxes increased to pay for stormwater management? 58% of municipalities, you know, 50%, I should say, 50% of Canadians think municipalities have already been upgrading their systems for excess storm events. The reality is, sorry Mississauga staff, but and Mississauga's not alone in this, is that 75% of Mississauga has no flood control because it was built prior to flood requirements, right? 1.7 billion shortfall in stormwater management. Only 15% of Mississauga has water quality treatment. And spills cost the region of Peel up to $500,000 a year. So again, not just extreme events, we're talking erosion costs money, we're talking, which is primarily frequent events, and spills cost money. So there is economics in protecting our environment. Brampton's story, which is just above Mississauga. So Mississauga's downstream of all of this. Projected growth of 200,000. It's one of the fastest growing municipalities in Canada. Despite the current stormwater management practices of end-of-pipe ponds, we're seeing increasing trends of wet weather stream flows 3 times that of pre-development. Okay? And that's simply because stormwater management ponds do not deal with the excess runoff volume from the urban water cycle. Okay, when you pave surfaces, you get more runoff. And so what's happening is ponds just hold the water back, but they don't deal with the water balance, the runoff volume. So that means increased pollutant loads and increased erosion. Orangeville, we don't think about stormwater when we think of drought, but Orangeville is a groundwater-based municipality. They get their water supply from the groundwater. If we pave that ability to infiltrate. What it also has an impact on is Island Lake, which provides a similar capacity for the wastewater treatment plant downstream. Source water protection studies have shown that if we continue to build the way we're building with end-of-pipe ponds and not try to maintain our water balance, that we will see reductions in stream flows of up to 50% during the dry weather. So we will not be able to assimilate or dilute the wastewater treatment plant, not to mention our fisheries. And fisheries is a very big economic revenue generator for the Credit River. So I try to ask you to not just look at it from a flood extreme perspective, but also from a holistic perspective. If Orangeville has to build a pipe to ensure water supply for its residents, that's a heck of an expense. So what we've been trying to do is to try and adopt low-impact development techniques for both new and existing urban areas. And I'm going to explain what low-impact development means. And what we found through our climate change modeling is that climate change just exacerbates the impact of urbanization. So regardless of climate change, we need to change, right? I mean, regardless of climate change, we still have a stormwater deficit in most of our municipalities. Most municipalities, I don't know of any municipality that didn't have building that was built prior to, or parts of their municipality not built prior to flood control or water quality. So regardless of water quality, we need to change, or of climate change. So the typical scenario and the typical mindset of stormwater management is, you know, it falls, we convey it away from our urban areas and to our streams. So what we're talking about when we talk about low impact development is really looking at treating it where it falls, treating it along the path, and treating it before it goes to the lake. So again, when we're talking about treating it where it falls, there's green roofs, there's permeable pavement, there's rainwater harvesting, which rank very low for residents. Residents do not like the looks of rainwater harvesting. So if you try to sell cisterns, they're not really going to go with it. You're probably going to get less than 10% uptake. And you wonder why? Because you're giving them away, because they look ugly. And I'm going to talk to you about that. Bioretention cells. treating it along the path. So bioretention swales along the path. You'll notice I picked a really pretty picture. And I keep screaming at my staff when they pick the really ugly pictures because, again, if it looks ugly, it's what's happening on the surface. How many times do you get complaints about what's happening under the ground? How many times do you get complaints about what's happening above the ground, about the curbs, right? So do yourself a favor if you're doing low impact development, hire a landscape architect, but don't have him go off and do 25 different types of plant species so people don't know how to weed them. Pick 1 or 2 or 5 types of species, group them up so people can weed them, and they look good. And I will, even to the horror of the stewardship department, say, if it's not native, I don't care, as long as it's not invasive and aggressive, but it's something that people like and it blends in with the aesthetic appeal. It's gotta be sexy, right? And I'll talk about that. Stormwater can be sexy. Treat it before it goes to the lake, so wet ponds, wetlands. When we talk about LID, we're talking, and people often get it confused with green infrastructure. So LID is really a component of green infrastructure. It's not all encompassing. So what I'm going to share with you next is some of the lessons we've learned over the last 7 years in putting in 30 LID sites and in monitoring 12 of them. So here's a site in Lakeview in the city of Mississauga who's really been leading the way. There is no other site like this. This is a retrofit site. These were ditches that were, residents complained about and were converted to LID. And again, one of the things, we talk about uptake. If you don't have a good marketing plan and you use your conventional approach, you're going to get pushback. Don't set yourself up to be an environment like this for an open house, because then you're just going to get the pack mentality, right? What you want to do is set up a gallery of beautiful pictures, and you have people stationed at different groups, and you show them a vision of what their house could look like with these beautiful pictures. And guess what happens? You get over 90% uptake. We did, the city of Mississauga, through their water quality study, and this is consistent with what's been happening in surveys across the GTA, is we did residential surveys. And what we found is, and why I keep talking about beauty and aesthetics, is because landscape is a reflection of a person's self. It's the outward appearance. Who cares if the house is cluttered inside? It's what my neighbors see outside, right? And when we asked people to draw pictures of sustainable or eco-landscaping, their perception was a loss. Sustainable to them actually meant durable, which means pave over everything, right? So, our words are not the same as their words. I don't know where they're living, but it's not the place where I'm living in my head, because it's completely different. They're thinking weedy. And when we asked them to name native species, they said dandelion and trillium, and they left the third one blank. So when we're telling them to plant native species to reduce water consumption, they're thinking, you're a wacko, because I'm not planting dandelions, right? I'm not putting in herb gardens. You're crazy, right? So when we ask them, and then, here we have save the credit. And people are thinking their line of credit, right? Or we say, save the watershed, and they're 44% think it's a shed that holds water. I'm not kidding you. So we really wonder why, A, our outreach material doesn't work, and B, we're only connecting to 10%, because we're appealing to them on a purely logical level. We are not grabbing people's emotion. You will not convert people if you talk to them about Water Wednesday. Install a sub pump. It's not going to happen. So we have to change the way we operate. This is our new guidance documents. This is the region of Durham, and this is largely based on the fact that we're appealing to people's emotion, right? Pretty person, beautiful little kid smelling a flower, trying to get people to build rain gardens. What happens when you build a rain garden? You disconnect your roof leader, right? And you direct it to a pervious spot. I didn't have to tell them that. If they do the rain garden, that's all I care about. That's all the fish cares about too. So why they do it doesn't matter. Make it appealing, make it sexy. Afterwards you can tell them why they did it. So that's my spiel and sermon on that, and we can talk about that in the panel or in the questions. What I did want to highlight also was our monitoring information, because I believe monitoring is not research. Right now, we're in a stage where we're doing performance and risk assessment. So one of the reasons and barriers that I've talked to municipalities is we don't have enough data. So with our sites, we are comparing it to the national database in the States, so that you can compare the cold weather states and climates in Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois with what we're finding in Ontario, so that we can move forward with respect to our sizing of our stormwater management. What we've actually found is that we're comparable, if not better, and we're doing actually better than what we originally thought, and I will show you, I will talk about that. One of the things that we found when you incorporate, you know, one of the pictures I have, I took it off in the slide, is if you look at an urban area, where are your opportunities to put in stormwater management? Land costs are 3 to 4 times that of infrastructure costs. So road right-of-ways, public areas, residential, that's your opportunity, right? That's all you got. So if you incorporate land costs, you can save up to 25% in some cases with respect to putting in road or LID into road reconstruction projects. So in the Lakeview project, where you take a ditch and you put it into an LID versus a curb and gutter, you can save up to 25%. There are other cases where, you know, the cost is not that much of a savings. Elm is an example. If you take into account land costs for Elm, maybe $10,000 to $20,000. Elm is a really neat example. We have parking laybys along the street that infiltrate the water, and then access is directed to these planters, and then goes into the municipal storm sewer. It's a neat project because it's taking public road runoff, and it's public road runoff, and it's treating it on both private, public school, and municipal roads. So it's a good opportunity to say, you know what, there's opportunities that we're not looking at that probably we should be looking at. So we have been doing monitoring on Lakeview since 2011. 2011 was 40% more rain than typical over the last 30 years, and 2012 was 10% less. So roughly 90-95% of rainfall events are less than 30 millimeters, okay? And why I say that's important is because when you look at the performance of Elm, what we're finding is that we're essentially capturing 90 to 95% of all rainfall events in those planters that you see, okay? That means that for 95% of rainfall events, there are no pollutants going to our lake. There are no pollutants going to our riverways, when once there was. That also means that for 90 to 95% of the events, there's no runoff going into our municipal storm sewers. So those oversized, aging infrastructure is not being overstressed by the LID system. It's actually helping. We actually, you know, one of the things we did, the Elm Street was not designed for was extreme events. But we had the pleasure, or not the pleasure, of having an extreme event, and Elm was actually in the eye of the July 8th storm. It received a 104 millimeter event over 5.5 hours. What we found was actually pretty impressive. The LID system was able to shave 60% off the peak. And the only limitation was not the planters, but actually the road grading, because there was bypass from the road grade. So the LID system could potentially have stored more or shaved more, but due to the road grading, there was bypass during the event. It was also able to reduce the volume to up to 30%. So that's very impressive. So that's meaning that we're reducing the stress on the system. And it was a 40-minute lag before the municipal system even felt anything from the storm event. So that's incredible, because these things were designed for less than a 2-year storm. It's a retrofit. It's in clay soil, so it's everything every engineer has ever told me can't be done, we did. City of Mississauga did, right? So pretty impressive, and much better than we intended. And so I think that, it speaks to the fact that if you don't try it, you don't know. So put it in, test it, learn from other people, share your mistakes. One of the things that we came to, I went to a conference in Minneapolis, and my presentation was on mistakes. Because every time I hear people talk about pilot studies, they always talk about the successes. You don't learn from successes, you learn from mistakes. And so we've developed an LID construction guide to help people when they're implementing LID to learn from the mistakes that we've made in construction, because this really is an evolving science. And just like the Apple iPod that has versions come out every year, we too will have a guidebook that will be a living document that feeds on all the examples that we see. We have an LID map on our website that provides information for the LID sites that are not just in our watershed but across Ontario. We give tours. We actually have a tour with the City of Mississauga on September 24th. Unfortunately, it's sold out, but we will have another one in the spring. They're very good opportunities for you to see these things in the ground. They're not Star Trekian. They blend in with the urban environment, or they should, so that people will not complain about them. And they do function well so far that we've seen. We are also monitoring the maintenance of these so that we can look at life cycle costing and provide you with the opportunity to make informed infrastructure asset management planning. Okay? So please check out our website. We will be putting up guidance documents on retrofitting both in the road right-of-way, in the industrial commercial, and public lands and residential. So we do have some guidance documents out for each of you, or for all of you if you're interested, and I guess I can take questions now.
Thank you, Christine.
Yes?
I wanted to ask a question.
Good.
Dan Frankel, City of Kingston.
Mm-hmm.
I have the mic. So we also did a new road construction project where we used bulb outs on the corners of a particular street and put LID within the boulevard space.
Great. So we want to put you on our LID map.
You do it.
See, nobody's going to ask any more questions now that I said that. Okay, go. Sorry.
So and we did use an actual reputable landscaper, made it look very nice. It cost some extra money.
Yeah.
Above your topsoil and stuff like that, and just seeding. But the one picture you showed a very short boulevard length. So we had like 30 or 40 meter sections, and some of that's was limited by driveway aprons, right? But were you doing those regardless of the length, where I saw your curb inlet and your curb outlet was within maybe 10 meter spacing there? I thought you'd want to have something more of a longer channel.
Are you talking about
where your ditch was reinstated?
The Elm project?
Yeah.
The Elm project is about 0.5 hectare drainage area, so it is a very long, it's a longer road section. So, does that answer your question?
No, so when the road drainage is conveyed through
Yeah.
the gutter system, it
Yeah.
enters a curb inlet.
Yeah.
But that was only, getting some feedback from the mic here. It only entered the boulevard space. It was only a very short segment till
Yeah.
the curb outlet was right beside it. So I thought you'd want to enter into an LID and then have some kind of duration in the boulevard before it exits out in the bottom end. That's.
Are you talking about the Lakeview project? The Lakeview?
Keep going there.
Yeah, it was Lakeview.
So it's one of
This
has
one
the,
here?
Yeah, that guy there.
Oops.
Yeah, they are the people working what we're not doing today here, I guess. Yeah.
It's a retrofit, right? So part of the problem is you have constraints, and that in each section does have varying widths with respect to the road right away, and as well as sort of the buffer strip between the swales. But you're constrained in a retrofit as to how much you can do. One of the things that we have learned, though, is that surface inlets are really critical. and the grading of the inlets, and then the way the structure looks in trying to get flow into the swales. There's definitely things we'd like to optimize in the Lakeview site as far as getting more water into the swales. And we've also learned that with respect to Elm as well, that just simply to the geometry and the layout of the road, that we could have better optimized some of the inlet structures and how the flow goes in. Part of that is lessons learned. Part of it were in the design and through construction. You know, I think one of the things that's really important with low impact development is that you inspect, the inspection and training for construction and contractors and inspectors is really important because it is a different approach. Grading is really critical, and as is the inlet structure also, obviously. So yeah, those are things that we've learned, and we're actually doing some optimization, I should say, of the Lakeview project to try and get more flow into the Lakeview. Yeah, that's one of the things that's in our guide. And one of the things that's going to come into our retrofit for road reconstruction is just the inlet structures and the grading and the amount. So the spacing of the inlets is a lot more frequent in these than it is in a typical road cross section, because you want to get as much water into these structures as you can, right? To try and get distributed flow as opposed to having, you know, flow coming and then channelizing into them. So I hope that helps you. Okay. Yeah.
Larry Thompson from Thompson Field Investigations.
Mm-hmm.
One of your earlier slides, it looked like you were encouraging, you didn't comment on it, but you're encouraging exfiltration from the storm sewer manhole, the storm sewer itself. On the street, you showed like a little holy manhole with water going out of it.
You're talking about perforated
right
pipe?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, one thing you may not have thought about this that I've come up against fairly recently is that when you have an exfiltration for a storm sewer, which is shallow, typically sanitary sewers are lower, and where they cross, you have granular backfill, you can end up with a fair bit of extra infiltration into the sanitary sewer.
I mean, we haven't found that yet. I mean, that's something that definitely we can be monitoring. But we have the Etobicoke exfiltration system that TRCA's has. Ottawa has an exfiltration system. Brampton does. They haven't commented on that.
It's only likely to happen where they cross.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if they're in the same trench, which is a bad idea.
So it's something to consider in your design. I don't think it's a no-go. I think it's something that you need to consider. Absolutely. Thank you.
And you can put in clay plugs which stop that movement too.
Good.
We have time for one more question. If there is one. Yes, please. A mic will come to you.
Thank you. My name's David Kellerson, and I'm with the City of Toronto. I was wondering about the maintenance of these rain gardens and the boulevard. Do you rely on the homeowners to maintain them or the municipality?
Right now, the contract that the city has with the contractors, they maintain it up to the first 2 years to establish the vegetation. One of the things that we do as part of our monitoring program, our monitoring staff go out once or every 2 weeks out to the site, depending on making sure the equipment's working, so that you don't have the equipment failing when you have a rainfall event, so we can capture things. When they go out to a site, they check the maintenance. They look at the plants and that sort of thing, because one of the things you don't want to have happen, which is what we found with stormwater ponds, is that a contractor will wait till assumption and then plant whatever's dead, and so the city's left with half dead or half seedlings and half mature plantings. So you don't want to have that happen with low impact development. You want to have the contractor replacing things as they go rather than waiting till the end. What we're doing is collecting the data with respect to maintenance to see what are the maintenance costs, so we can incorporate them into life cycle costs. What I will say with Lakeview is that the Lakeview residents are putting their own plants in. They are maintaining the ones they have. They've gotten so much good press, and people are liking it so much that other streets around the area have come to us and our monitoring staff and say they want it too when our staff go out. But I think that's a city issue, whether they want to do that again. I know the councillor has gone door to door, and residents were quite happy with the plantings. Our recommendation in the guide is if you're a municipality, talk to your Parks and Rec staff. If there's areas where they're going out and they're doing a lot of maintenance and gardening or whatever, put a beautiful Lakeview project up in those areas where there's already going to be some type of maintenance protocol from your Parks and Rec guys, like on a Burnhamthorpe Road, right? Or where you have a resident area or community group like Lakeview where they are maintaining it themselves. Again, landscape is critical. If it looks weedy, crap, not nice, people are going to rip it out and they're going to complain to you. If it looks nice and to them it's a reflection of themselves, they're going to want to maintain it. If you're in a high rental area, don't set yourself up for failure, right? A high rental area, they're probably not going to maintain it themselves. So in a high rental area, put grass, right? So really look, a retrofit, people say retrofits are the worst case, right? Worst case scenario, you have so many constraints, but to me, they're the best opportunity because you actually know how that land is going to be used. You know whether, you can go down a street and go, you know what, these people, the grass is really high. Why would we bother putting in gardens if they're not going to maintain grass, right? Don't set yourself up and try and put these beautiful grass plants in an area like that. But then I would do grass swales, or I would do grass LID, right? Or again, don't put permeable pavement in an area where there's a smoking pit, right? Because this is only going to increase your maintenance costs if you have to keep taking out the cigarette butts from permeable pavement. So look at your land use, where it's adjacent, and then look at what type of landscape feature fits best in. And that's the challenge, the mindset that we have to change. Because end of pipe ponds, we haven't cared about the community, right? We stuck it away from everybody so we didn't have to care about talking to anybody, right? And now we do, because we don't have a choice. Land costs are 3 to 4 times that of infrastructure cost. You got to put it into the built environment.
Thank you, Christine.